Hi everyone, it's Josh with Talk About Trek, and we are back again with Book 3 of the Dominion War series. This time we're back with the TNG crew, and this is Book 3 of 4 of the Dominion War series, and this is a novel by John Vornholt. So the first book that we read, Book 1 of 4, it kind of followed what was going on with the Enterprise and their crew during the Dominion War. So I won't go too into that. You can go back and watch that one if you want. But this picks up where that book left off. So this is kind of the exciting conclusion of Captain Picard, Sam Lavelle, Laren, the Orb of Peace, and what everything is going on with them. Here on the cover, they show you the Enterprise blasting a couple of Cardassian ships. That does not happen in this book, but the picture is nice. And they also do include a wonderful Captain Picard there. Look at that. So that's good. So from the back. In the Federation's time of greatest peril, as the starship Enterprise readies itself for battle, Captain Jean-Luc Picard leads a desperate mission of espionage deep into the heart of hostile Cardassian Empire. Unless they can prevent the Dominion from creating an artificial wormhole, hordes of fresh Jem'Hadar warriors and changelings will pour into the Alpha Quadrant, dooming the Federation to unconditional surrender. But there may be a traitor along on this mission, and Picard finds he cannot trust even his closest allies. Wow. So, yeah. The Federation is in trouble. There is an artificial wormhole that is being built on the other side of the Badlands, and Picard and crew have found out about it. So they are on basically a desperate mission right now to do whatever they can to stop that wormhole from being built. And that's where this book picks up. And that's where the first book in this series left off. So this picks up with Sam Lavelle aboard the Orb of Peace. Of course, Sam Lavelle, you remember from Lower Decks fame. Not the new cartoon Lower Decks, but the episode Lower Decks. Very wonderful episode of TNG, and his character really shines in this book, and the first one as well. So the main characters here are Captain Picard, of course, Laren, and then Sam Lavelle. Those are like the main three. So it starts out, basically they're on board this Orb of Peace, and they're trying to figure out a way that they can get closer and closer and closer to this artificial wormhole to find some crazy way to stop it from being. So they have a Cardassian patrol on their long-range sensors coming in, and they come up with a good idea, a clever ruse, and they set up, they do have a Romulan on board, who was part of the first story. So the Romulan there, along with the Vulcan they have on board, Torek, they pose as kind of like a scientific mission. And they fool this Cardassian patrol into believing that there's some kind of scientific mission to the Badlands, and they're able to go and get away. So, really dumb Cardassians, and it works. But there they go. So they're able to make it to the Badlands, thankfully. Now, the book does kind of segue a couple of times into what is going on with the Enterprise, which is not much. Basically, it is locked in Starbase, undergoing repairs, and it's been there for most of the last story and all of this story so far. And they have a little bit of a storyline going on there between Commander Riker and then the commander of the Starbase, whose name is Shanna Russell, who has kind of going through like a lot of trouble, a lot of like survivor's trauma. And so there's a little bit of a storyline there where he's trying to help her work through that and also get the Enterprise back into service so they can get into this mission. And then Data is also still out there too. So since the Enterprise had to go to the Starbase, they sent Data in a lone shuttle out there just to monitor as best he could what was going on with the mission. So he is out there, and what he does is basically kind of go and find some inhospitable planet to land on, set up his sensors, and try to monitor long distance and keep an eye on what Picard and his crew are up to. So the book takes a very strange turn, I would say, here when we get to about Chapter 4. So they get... before they get to Chapter 4, as in we read on the back, sabotage aboard the ship. So one of the crew is not who they say they are. one of the crew is trying to stop the mission from happening, and the replicators have been sabotaged. So right now they have nothing to eat at all. And that's bad in space. They're going to starve. So they're pretty worried about that. They decide they need to head to the Badlands. They have to scavenge for what they can. And they're told of a place called told by the Romulan, called Death Valley, where all like these ghost ships are at. So, like I said, this is where the book kind of takes a weird turn for like 4 chapters, where it seems like maybe the author didn't even want to write about the Dominion War anymore right then, but he just had another idea and he filled it in here. And it fits pretty well and it keeps the story moving along, but it just doesn't fit in with the rest of what's going on, and it seems like it almost would have been like the plot to a whole other book. But anyway, what they do is they enter into the Badlands. They find this place called Death Valley, and it has all these ships, these ancient relics of ships that you can tell have been stripped and have been like searched over. And it seems like there's going to be nothing there of value. But they do find another ship there as well, and it's this race of people called the Talavanians, who are scavengers, and they offer to trade supplies for basically Picard and crew helping them scavenge things from these ghost ships. So, like I said, this is where it seems like that it's just a whole different story here at this point. So they do agree to help in exchange for getting some food, getting a replicator as well. That's what they really need. And they agree to help them scavenge these ships. So you have a couple chapters where they're going on to these ships, and it's things are kind of phasing in and out of like their time. And when things phase in, they can like grab them out and pull them in to their own time. And that's kind of what they're doing. And they're using communicators to beam these things out. And they're like all of Starfleet, the Starfleet crew is kind of like getting bad feelings about this, kind of like they're feeling like they're grave robbers, doing something that they definitely shouldn't be doing, but doing it because they have to. So there's something very important that these Talavanians are looking for. It's like the ship's plaque. And Geordi, with his special vision, is able to actually see it and find it. And they are super psyched about that. So they really want to get it out of phase and into their phase so they can take it and do whatever they do with these things. So they bring in, and of course they're going to shoot it with some inverse tachyons. In Star Trek, if you want to do something, you shoot it with some inverse tachyons, and it's going to be good. It didn't turn out so good for them, though. They're trying to bring this thing out. They shoot it with these inverse tachyons. At this time, they have the crews retrieve the replicator that they need, so they're kind of good there. They've did enough stuff for these weird people where they got the supplies they need to continue on with the mission. But once this thing gets shot with these inverse tachyons, this whole ancient fleet starts phasing back into existence, immediately blows up the Talavanian ship. The Orb of Peace is able to beam back everybody to the ship, and they're able to kind of luckily sneak out in time. And then it appears that the whole fleet, which phased back into existence, then self-destructs, but then turns back into the kind of like hulks, the abandoned hulks that they were before. And that's the end of that 4 chapters. They're out of there. The problem is solved. They didn't have a replicator. Now they have a replicator. And you just have these weird 4 chapters of kind of like, well, what the heck? But it did push the story through to the next part, where it gets more and more interesting, where there's more and more sabotage aboard the ship, and you have kind of Picard kind of trying to ferret out who is the saboteur. And one of the ways he does this is he gets Torek, who's the Vulcan on board with him, to go to everybody. Well, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So before Picard goes on this interrogation mission, they do develop a plan. So they've made it through the Badlands, and they see what they can do. There is a kind of a ring of debris close enough to this artificial wormhole that they're building that they can hide in. And then they can disguise themselves, or disguise their escape pod, as a piece of debris. They're going to float that close enough to the thing, beam a bomb over, and blow it up. That's the long and short of it. So they have a plan, and they begin to work on the plan. But then the saboteur enacts his plan as well, and kind of everything gets screwed up. So the explosives they're going to need to use ruined. The beacon they were going to use to send to Starfleet, ruined. Everything that they needed, ruined. So Picard puts Geordi on the escape pod job and says, hey, get this thing built, because that's what we're going to have to do, and says, pretty much sleep in here. Now, that's when Picard starts to ferret out the saboteur. So what he does is he has Torek come with him, and he goes to everybody on the crew and is like, there's a saboteur here, we know it. This guy's going to mind meld you. And there's nothing you can do about it. And if they are like, if they deny it, he's going to be like, it's you. But everybody seems to be like, okay, fine, we'll do it. And so he goes through kind of everybody that way and is not able to kind of suss out who exactly is the bad guy. But it gets revealed there in the end, because I guess they kind of know that it's getting... Stop making so much noise down there. They realize that it's the saboteur realizes that Picard is getting close to the trail, and kind of jumps into further action. And so Ro is sitting there, kind of left alone with Torek after Picard moves, and looks over to Torek, and Torek's face starts changing, and it mirrors and it changes right into Ro's own face, and then she reaches out with a phaser and blasts. The changeling does, and Ro is knocked out. So it turns out the whole time the saboteur was Torek, and Torek is a changeling. So Torek was actually a cool character in the Lower Decks episode, which I watched again a couple days ago, which was really cool. So that kind of stinks. So you don't really know the fate of the real Torek. But the Torek here has been a changeling the whole time. So Ro gets locked up. Bad news, they find out that the collider is operational. Basically, the clock is ticking now. I think they've got something like 12 hours before the whole Dominion fleet is going to be coming through that wormhole. So time is against them, and the saboteur is on the move. The saboteur, as Ro, decides to go give Sam a little kissy-kissy, but Sam realizes something that's up, and he's like, I don't know about this. But not he doesn't realize enough to know that she was a changeling, apparently. Now, during this part in the story, they're also trying to figure out, okay, what's our plan B? The initial plan of beaming in and blowing up this one room here is a good idea, but if that doesn't work, what else are we going to do? And Sam has a good idea of blowing up basically like the air tubes throughout this whole thing, filling them with hydrogen, blowing that, and that would be a good way to blow it up. So they're also working on this plan B as they're trying to chase down the saboteur and not get killed at the same time. Now, the saboteur has made it to the bridge, has disabled both the crew that were up there on the bridge, and has basically removed all control. And then by the time that Picard and them get there and find out, the changeling warps out of there, jumps out of the room, closes the door, and locks them in. So now they're locked in there. There's no control of the ship. Geordi is still in the escape pod, but he's only going to let people in that know the password. So he's being very suspicious, and the changeling is trying to get in there. Comes through a couple of different times. In the escape pod, helping him is another character named Woyle, who is like one of the prisoners of the Dominion, who's been rescued and has been working with the crew this whole time, and he is really wanting his shot at this changeling. And he's like, Geordi, next time this changeling comes along, just beam me behind them with a phaser, and I'm going to blast them. And he's like, okay. So that's the plan. So the changeling eventually leaves Ro's form, changes to Picard's form, and then lures Ro back to the escape pod, trying to open it up. And then as soon as Geordi realizes that that's not the real Picard, Woyle beams in behind, hits him with a phaser blast, and blows off a chunk of the thing's shoulder. But at the same time, it turns around and kills that guy, and then turns into liquid goo and escapes through a vent or something. So it goes down into the vent, and they go down and they follow it, and it's dead. So, basically it's dead. It monologues for a second, and they blast it in half before it tries to jump out of the torpedo tube. But the plan that Woyle had works, so good for Woyle. He got his final revenge, even though he was killed in the end. So, now we're at the final 2 chapters of this book. So it's taken just so many weird different turns to get here. But now we're here. So they're finally at the point of the mission where they're going to advance on this artificial wormhole and proceed to destroy it. But at the last moment, the changeling, before it dies, is revealed. It sent out a distress call, and the Jem'Hadar ship is on its way. Oh no. So the ship is on its way. They have no chance to survive. It's going to be here in 5 minutes. So they set their self-destruct. They're ready basically for the end. At the very last moment, as this ship is coming in, it's attached its tractor beam to them. Here comes Data in his shuttle. Pew, 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 blows them out of the sky. So that was a fun little scene, little kind of final rescue from Data. Nice to see him come back into the story and just add something to it. So now the crew has got more resources. They have Data, they have the shuttle. Now they're ready to proceed to the artificial wormhole and blow it up. And this is the final 2 chapters, 14 and 15 here. We're in the final countdown here. So it really is kind of like a fast-paced ending to this book. And I won't get too much into crazy detail about it, but like I said, they have 2 plans here, Plan A and Plan B. Sam and Data beam in for Plan B, which is to blow up the basically all the oxygen or the hydrogen in there. So they beam in, they set their charges. Data does. He's able to jump up to this catwalk, and he's like turning dials and doing this and doing that, and he's punching things into the computer. And he's able to set the charges all the while, like Sam is laying down covering fire from all these Jem'Hadar. So really nice action scenes, I guess, here to end the book. On the other side, Plan A, which was to blow up this control panel that controls everything there. Picard and Groff are there trying to do that. At the very last moment, aboard the escape pod where they all beam from, Geordi is able to beam out of the escape pod as it's blown up by the Jem'Hadar who have detected it, and he beams into Picard's location with them. Groff gets shot by a Jem'Hadar through the shoulder just as he gets them through the door into the control room. Now they're in the final minutes of the book. Everything is on fire and going crazy. The Jem'Hadar is firing at everybody from all angles. All the bombs are planted. Everything is where it needs to go. It's basically kind of like this final countdown. And everybody thinks, well, this is it. They're dead. There's no getting out of this. And at the very last minutes, here comes the Orb of Peace, followed by the shuttlecraft. And they come blazing in. And luckily, there's no ships in the area because all the Dominion ships have dispersed because the wormhole is basically getting ready to open. So they're able to come in, evade the defenses. The Orb of Peace takes all the damage coming in and gets destroyed and blown up, and they beam everybody aboard the shuttlecraft, which warps out at the last minute, just as Plan B works. So Plan A kind of failed, I think. Plan B works. The artificial wormhole starts blowing up just as this fleet of ships is coming through it. So kind of an awesome, exciting ending to the whole thing. They warp away at the last minute, followed by a Jem'Hadar battle cruiser, and at the very last, and then again they're like, okay, well now we're dead again for sure. So they set their self-destruct again. They think it's over, and boom, at the very last minute, it's the Enterprise. So the Enterprise comes in and saves them, is able to beam everybody aboard, and that's it. They save the day. So. At the end of the day, Ro and Sam have a kind of little happy ending with each other. They decide they're going to go off and become farmers for a little bit. They reveal right at the end that this whole thing takes place 2 days after they retake DS9. And the retaking of DS9, is what happens, I believe, in the next little book I'll be reading here, which is book 404. Which is just a novelization of these ones, but that's for next week. This is this week's book. So, what did I think in the end of this book, which was officially called Tunnel Through the Stars by John Vornholt? I thought it was good. It was a good Star Trek book, but it was a weird inclusion, I guess, for this Dominion War story. Because I felt like it was more of a story about what was going on inside this ship and less of a story about the actual plan against the Dominion. And then if you look at it, you like break it down chapter by chapter. That's actually what it is. I mean, it's basically a couple chapters of that actually being enacted, and the rest is kind of everything that's going on board the ship. Which doesn't mean that it's bad. It was a very fun book, and like I said, it kept the pace going and going and going. It did give a satisfying conclusion to the story that they set up in the first book, or that John Vornholt set up in the first book, which was the manager, the commander of the Starbase 206, where all the repairs were handled for Starfleet, was kind of unconsciously or something, maybe kind of holding ships back too long to keep them from going into the fray and dying. And they kind of resolve that in this book, but that's just like on the back burner in this. The whole thing is really Picard, Ro, and Sam on the Orb of Peace. All the other side characters are entertaining. I would say the Romulan character Hasnek was probably one of the standouts here. But everyone has their kind of moment to shine in it, so all in all, it's a really fun book. It was just like I said, just kind of a strange diversion. We have like 4 chapters in here where it seems like it could have been out of a whole another book entirely, when maybe at that point they should have just ran into a Dominion ship and found an interesting way to outwit them or something like that. But who am I to complain? I had a good time with this. So that was Star Trek The Next Generation, The Dominion War, Book 3, Tunnel Through the Stars by John Vornholt again. And going to be picking up Book 4 real soon. Also look forward to something new coming up over here, if you can see. I have had a chance there to recently reorganize my Star Trek book collection. So I want to go through that a little bit with everybody and just kind of talk about that. Because it's been so fun to put it back into order, and there's still a lot of work to do. And then, of course, whenever you do that, you always see, well, man, I need this and I need that. So there may be some new stuff coming too. So I'm looking forward to that. So as always, everybody, thank you so much for watching. Live long and prosper, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.